The call came in late, way past midnight, the kind of hour where nothing good ever starts and nothing clean ever ends. A voice on the other end, low, controlled, almost shaking, said one thing before the line went dead. It wasn't about loyalty, it was about survival. That's when everything around the MO3 situation started to look different. Because now, we're not just talking about a missed appearance. We're not just talking about Trapboy Freddy standing alone where somebody else was supposed to be. Nah, we're talking about tension so thick, people in the room said you could feel it in your chest before a single word was spoken. We're talking about a night where alliances shifted, where trust broke down in real time, and where one decision to not show up might have saved a life, or started something even bigger. Fans were confused at first. They thought it was scheduling, maybe miscommunication, but behind the scenes, emotions were already running high, calls were being ignored, messages left on read, people choosing sides without saying it out loud, and the closer the night got, the more it started to feel like something was about to go wrong. Because MO3, he wasn't just dealing with industry pressure. There were whispers, quiet ones at first, about conversations that didn't sit right, about energy that felt off, about people showing up not to support, but to watch. And Trapboy Freddy, he was expecting something different that night, something solid, something that never came. What nobody knew at the time was that the absence spoke louder than any presence ever could. The hours leading up to that night didn't feel normal, not even close. People close to the situation started noticing small things first, little shifts in tone, conversations cutting short, voices lowering when certain names got mentioned. And at the center of it all was MO3, not loud, not panicking, but watching everything, calculating. One source said he kept pacing back and forth, phone in hand, reading the same message over and over like he was trying to find something hidden between the lines. Because by that point, it wasn't just about showing up anymore, it was about what walking into that room could mean. Trapboy Freddy had already locked in the appearance. The energy on his side was different, confident, steady, like everything was business as usual. People around him were hyping it up, saying the city needed that moment. Cameras, lights, people pulling up dressed like it was going to be one of those nights you talk about later. But behind that confidence, there was pressure too, because expectations were high, and everybody knew who was supposed to stand beside him. And when that kind of presence is missing, people notice. Back across town, things were getting tense in a way you couldn't fake. MO3's circle wasn't laughing like they usually did. No music playing loud. Just quiet conversations, broken up by long pauses. One person finally asked him straight up, "You pulling up or not?" And that's when the room shifted. Because instead of answering quick, he took a breath, looked around, and said something that didn't sit right with anybody. It ain't the place, it's the energy. Now that right there, that's the kind of statement that tells you everything without explaining anything. Because in this world, energy can mean a lot of things. It can mean tension, it can mean disrespect, or it can mean somebody already made a move, and you just haven't seen it yet. And according to what people are saying now, MO3 had been feeling that energy building for days. Phone calls had started getting shorter. People he trusted weren't picking up like they used to. One conversation in particular stood out. A close associate reportedly told him, "Just come through, it's all love." But the way it was said, too quick, too rehearsed, and MO3 caught that. Because when things are really solid, nobody has to convince you twice. Meanwhile, over at the venue, the mood was shifting in a different way. Fans were showing up heavy, expecting to see both sides in the same space. Social media was already buzzing, people posting, "Tonight gonna be crazy," like they could feel something in the air too. Trapboy Freddy stepped in, calm, focused, but even he started asking questions when the time kept moving and there was still no sign of MO3. "Where he at?" somebody asked. No clear answer. Another 10 minutes pass, then 20. Now the whispers start. Fans are shocked, phones out, recording everything, because when a moment like that starts to slip, it turns into something else. Something bigger than music. Back with MO3, the decision wasn't loud. There was no dramatic speech, no big announcement, just a quiet moment where he sat down, put the phone on the table, and shook his head. Somebody tried one more time, "You sure about this?" And he didn't even look up when he answered, "Yeah, I'm sure." But what makes this hit different is what came right after. Because not even 30 minutes later, stories started coming back from that location. Not confirmed, but enough to make people stop and think. Raised voices, a situation almost getting out of control, people stepping in before things went too far, and suddenly, that decision to stay away, it didn't look like hesitation anymore. It looked like instinct. And Trapboy Freddy? He still handled business, still showed face, but those who were paying attention said you could see it in his expression at certain moments, like something wasn't sitting right. Like he knew this wasn't how it was supposed to go. Because in this game, presence matters, and absence, it sends a message louder than anything you could say on a microphone. By the end of the night, nobody was talking about the performance the same way. They were talking about what didn't happen, about who wasn't there, about why. And that's when the situation really started to turn, because now it wasn't just behind the scenes tension anymore. Now the whole world was watching. By the next morning, everything had changed. What started as quiet confusion the night before had turned into full-blown speculation. Clips were already circulating, slowed down, zoomed in, analyzed frame by frame like people were trying to catch something they missed in real time. Fans were shocked, not just because MO3 didn't show, but because of how everything felt off. The body language, the energy in the room, the way certain people were moving like they knew more than they were saying. And then the questions started getting louder. Was it planned? Was it tension? Or was it something deeper? Because in this situation, silence was doing more talking than words ever could. Trapboy Freddy didn't immediately address it, and that right there added fuel. Because when something is simple, it gets cleared up quick. But this stayed hanging in the air. People close to him said he was calm, but focused, replaying the night in his head, trying to understand how things shifted so fast. One person claimed he said quietly, "That wasn't random." And when you hear something like that, you already know there's layers to it. Back on MO3's side, things weren't slowing down either. Calls started coming in early, some supportive, some pressing for answers. One voice, louder than the rest, reportedly told him, "You just made it look a certain way." And MO3 didn't deny it, he just responded with something that made everybody pause. Better a look than a loss. Now that line, that hit different. Because that's not something you say over nothing. That's not scheduling issues. That's not miscommunication. That's somebody choosing distance for a reason they don't feel safe explaining out loud. And the people around him, they felt that. You could hear it in how quiet the room got after he said it. Because now, this wasn't about appearances anymore. This was about survival, decisions, and consequences that don't always show up on camera. Meanwhile, the fans were doing what fans do best, connecting dots. Old clips resurfaced, past interviews started getting replayed. Moments where things seemed small before, now they look different. A side eye here, a tone shift there. Even the way certain names were mentioned in older conversations started to feel heavier. And once that door opens, it's hard to close it. One particular clip started gaining traction fast. It showed a moment from weeks earlier, nothing dramatic at the time, but now, people were dissecting every second. "Look how he reacted when that name came up," one fan posted. "He already knew something." Others weren't so sure, but one thing everybody agreed on? The energy between these circles had been changing long before that night. And then came the reports. Not official, not confirmed, but consistent enough to raise eyebrows. People at the venue started speaking up anonymously, saying there was tension before anything even started. Groups standing on opposite sides, conversations happening in corners. One person claimed they heard an argument start, voices rising just enough to draw attention before others stepped in and shut it down. Nothing exploded, but it came close. Close enough. And that's what made MO3's absence feel different, because if things were already on edge, then him walking into that could have shifted everything. And whether people wanted to admit it or not, his decision was starting to look less like avoidance and more like awareness. Trapboy Freddy, on the other hand, was still being watched closely. Every move, every expression, every post. When he finally spoke brief, controlled, it didn't give much away. But sometimes, what you don't say carries more weight than what you do. His tone wasn't angry, but it wasn't light either. It was measured, careful, like somebody choosing every word for a reason. And fans picked up on that immediately. Something happened behind the scenes. You can tell this deeper than they saying. The energy ain't right. That's what the comments were filled with. Because at this point, it wasn't just about two names anymore. It was about everything surrounding them. The people, the pressure, the history that doesn't always get documented but still shapes every move. Back in private, one final conversation reportedly took place that day, one that didn't last long, but said enough. A voice on the line asked MO3 directly, "You think it's that serious?" And his response? Calm, direct, no hesitation. "I don't think, I know." And just like that, whatever doubt was left disappeared. Because now, it wasn't speculation from the outside anymore. It was confirmation from within. And once that kind of statement hits the surface, there's no going back to normal. As the situation kept unfolding, the distance between both sides didn't just stay quiet, it started to harden. What used to be indirect tension was now turning into something you could feel through screens, through interviews, through the smallest reactions. Nobody was saying everything outright, but everybody was saying just enough. And that's when people close to Trapboy Freddy started speaking a little more openly. Not on record, not with full details, but enough to shift the narrative again. One voice reportedly said, "It wasn't supposed to go like that, but once it did, you can't undo it." That statement alone had fans reading between every line. Because if something wasn't supposed to go like that, then that means there was already a plan, already an expectation, already something in motion before the night even started. Meanwhile, MO3 wasn't moving like somebody caught in drama. He was moving like somebody who already made peace with a decision. No panic, no scrambling to explain himself. Just controlled silence, broken only by a few statements that felt more like warnings than explanations. One moment stood out when someone in his circle asked him, "You think they looking at it like disrespect?" And he answered without hesitation, "They can look at it how they want. I'm still here." That line hit heavy because it confirmed what people were starting to suspect. This wasn't about image anymore. This was about staying alive in a situation where one wrong move could shift everything permanently. Fans were split right down the middle. Some believed MO3 avoided a setup. Others felt like Trapboy Freddy was left in a position that could have turned dangerous for him too. And then there were those who believed both sides were dealing with something deeper, something nobody was ready to fully expose. Emotions ran high across social media, with debates turning into arguments, and arguments turning into full-blown digital chaos. The timeline didn't feel like entertainment anymore. It felt like people watching something real unfold in real time. Then another twist came in, something nobody expected. A name that hadn't been mentioned publicly yet suddenly started circulating behind the scenes. Not confirmed, not proven, but enough people were whispering it that it couldn't be ignored. According to sources, this individual had connections on both sides, and may have played a role in escalating the tension before that night. Some said messages were relayed differently than they were originally said. Others claimed certain details were intentionally left out to create confusion. And if that's true, then this wasn't just about two sides clashing, it was about manipulation in the middle. One reported conversation added even more weight to that theory. A close associate allegedly confronted this unnamed figure, saying, "Why it feel like you telling different stories to different people?" And the response? Cold, unbothered. Everybody hears what they need to hear. That right there, that kind of answer doesn't calm anything down. It makes everything worse. Back on Trapboy Freddy's side, the energy started shifting too. Less public, more internal. People noticed he wasn't as vocal as usual, not backing down, but not feeding into the noise either. One moment caught attention when he was asked directly about the situation. He paused, looked off for a second, then said, "Ain't everything for the internet?" And that was it. Short, controlled, but loaded. Because when someone says that, it means there's a whole story sitting behind the scenes that the public isn't ready to hear, and maybe never will. At the same time, those who were actually present that night kept adding pieces to the puzzle. One person claimed the tension reached a point where security had to reposition people inside the venue. Another said certain individuals were being watched closely before anything even started. No fights broke out, no chaos hit the headlines, but the potential for it, that was there. And that's what keeps this situation heavy. Because nothing exploded, but everything pointed to the fact that it could have. Back with MO3, the conversations became even more private, tighter circle, fewer voices allowed in. But one statement leaked that changed how people looked at everything again. When asked if he regretted not showing up, he reportedly said, "Regret only come when you ignore what you feel. I listened." That sentence alone told the entire story without needing details, because instinct doesn't come from nowhere. It builds from patterns, from energy, from moments that don't sit right long before they make sense. And now, both sides were standing in their own space, separated not just by distance, but by decisions that couldn't be reversed. Because once you choose not to walk into a situation like that, you're not just avoiding a moment, you're changing the entire direction of what comes next. As the days kept passing, what started as tension slowly turned into something heavier, something that didn't need loud moments to prove it was real. You could feel it in the silence between posts, in the way both sides moved like every step was being watched, calculated, measured. Nobody rushed to fix anything, nobody tried to smooth it over, and that alone told people everything they needed to know. Because when situations can be fixed, they usually are. Quiet calls, private meetings, somebody stepping in to calm things down. But this? None of that was happening. If anything, the distance was becoming permanent. And then came another layer nobody saw coming. Someone from deeper inside the circle finally spoke up, not publicly, not for attention, but to set the tone straight among those who were closest to both sides. According to that account, the night wasn't just tense, it was already compromised before anyone even showed up. Moves had been made earlier that day, people had been placed in certain positions, information had been passed around in a way that didn't match across the board. And the scariest part? Not everybody in the room even knew they were part of something bigger. That kind of detail changes everything. Because now, it's not just about two artists and a missed appearance. It's about a situation where control was slipping, where too many unknown variables were in play. And in environments like that, one wrong move doesn't just affect one person, it affects everybody connected. When that information quietly reached MO3's side, the reaction wasn't loud, but it was serious. One voice reportedly said, "So it really was deeper than we thought." And MO3, he didn't act surprised. He just nodded and responded, "That's why I stayed where I was." No emotion, no extra explanation, just confirmation that his decision wasn't based on fear, it was based on awareness. Meanwhile, on Trapboy Freddy's side, the weight of that night hadn't disappeared either. Even though nothing escalated publicly, those close to him knew how close things might have come. One person described it as walking through something you didn't fully understand until after it was over. And that's a different kind of pressure, because it leaves questions that don't have easy answers. Did somebody know something ahead of time? Was the situation supposed to turn into something else? Or did it just spiral into something nobody could fully control? Fans kept digging, trying to connect every possible dot, but the deeper they went, the more complicated it became. Because every new detail didn't close the story, it expanded it. New names, new theories, new angles that made the entire situation feel less like a single moment and more like a chain reaction that had been building quietly for weeks. One particular conversation that surfaced later added even more tension. A mutual contact between both sides reportedly tried to reach out, hoping to clear the air, to at least open a line of communication. But the response they got wasn't what they expected. On one end, the message came back, "It's past talking now." And on the other side, "Ain't nothing to explain." That right there, that's when people knew things weren't going back. Because once both sides reach that point, it's no longer about misunderstanding. It's about standing firm in decisions that can't be undone. Even the people who tried to stay neutral started stepping back. The family was left divided not just in a literal sense, but in loyalty, in perspective, in how they interpreted everything that happened. Some believed the situation was avoided at the last second. Others believed something bigger had already taken place behind closed doors and just hadn't reached the surface yet. And through all of that, neither side broke character. MO3 stayed consistent, quiet, observant, moving carefully, like every next step mattered more than the last. Trapboy Freddy stayed solid in his own way, present, composed, but clearly aware that the situation wasn't as simple as it looked from the outside. Then one final detail came out, small, but powerful. A person who had been at the venue that night revealed that, at one point, someone near the entrance had said, "If he walks in here, everything changes." That statement wasn't shouted. It wasn't dramatic, but it was real enough that it stuck with everyone who heard it. Because think about that for a second. If he walks in here, everything changes. That means his presence alone carried weight. It means the situation wasn't neutral. It means something was already set, already waiting, already balanced on a line that could have snapped with one decision. And that decision? He didn't walk in. So now, looking back at everything, the missed calls, the short conversations, the strange energy, the almost moments that never fully happened, it all starts to connect in a way that feels less like coincidence and more like something narrowly avoided. But even with all that, the real tension never actually ended. It just shifted into something quieter, something unresolved, something that doesn't need noise to stay dangerous. And now, everything sits in that same quiet space where nothing is fully confirmed, but nothing feels accidental either. You've seen how one decision, one moment, can shift everything. A missed appearance turns into questions, questions turn into tension, and tension? That turns into something deeper that nobody can fully explain, but everybody can feel. Fans are still shocked, people are still picking sides, and the story? It's far from over. Because the real question is still hanging in the air. Was this a situation that got avoided at the last second? Or was this something already set in motion that just didn't play out the way it was supposed to? And if MO3 did walk in that night, would we be telling a completely different story right now? That's what makes this hit different. So now I'm asking you, what do you think really happened behind the scenes? Was it instinct or inside information? Was Trapboy Freddy left exposed? Or was this something bigger than both sides? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Don't just watch this story, be part of the conversation. And if you've been paying attention to real stories like this, where the truth doesn't always come out right away, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because the next update, it might change everything.